It's been a crazy day, yo. But I'm back with a new video. Today, in this video, I want to talk about the history and relationships of three terrorist groups. They are Al Qaeda, the Taliban, and ISIS, or Islamic State. Why do I want to talk about terrorist groups? I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. I started to pay more attention to the difference of these groups after I watched Homeland. I realized that I often had no clue about certain reference in the show, which motivated me to do a lot of research so I would have a better understanding. I was not very surprised when I found out that an average American cannot distinguish the groups nor has in depth knowledge of their beliefs and goals. I think it's not only important for us to have a basic understanding of the matter, especially after 9/11, but it's also a pressing responsibility to educate ourselves, especially the younger generation, and get more involved. After all, wars and instability in other parts of the world is no longer an isolated issue. It eventually affects all of us. Let's start it with Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda was started and led by Osama bin Laden during the Soviet Afghan War, which started in 1979 and is the group responsible for the 9/11 attack. Al Qaeda started as a small group of youths who joined the fight against the Soviet Union and was led and partly funded by Osama bin Laden. Other sources of income included the heroin trade and donations from supporters in the Gulf states. Bin Laden was born in a wealthy Saudi Arabian family of big contractors and businessmen. He waged jihad and helped Mujahideen fighters build tunnels and ammunition dumps from construction equipment owned by his family. Jihad means struggle on behalf of God and Islam, and a jihadist is someone who devotes himself to the cause. Ironically, America indirectly funded Al Qaeda at the time by sending weapons to Afghan militia groups to fight the Soviets. Osama bin Laden justified attacks on America by declaring war on the US after we responded to Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait in 1990. The US sent warships and ground forces to Saudi Arabia to protect the Arabian Peninsula from Iraq's expansion of control over the world's oil supplies. Osama bin Laden believed that America was invading Muslim lands, exerting Western influence and dominance, and stealing oil and wealth of the Muslims. It was a wake up call for him that the US is no different than the Soviet Union, and there was a need to defeat the other remaining superpower. 9/11 was not the first attack orchestrated by Al Qaeda. The 1998 American embassy attacks in East Africa were carried out simultaneously in Kenya and Tanzania. In 2000, the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Cole was attacked by a suicide bomber in Aden, Yemen. Although not carried out by Al Qaeda, the terrorists who bombed World Trade Center in 1993 spent time in an Al Qaeda training camp in Afghanistan. Bin Laden was hiding in a Pakistan complex for 10 years and eventually killed in action during the mission, of which the codename was Geronimo in 2011. The codename created some controversy at the time, due to it being a Native American leader who defied the US government and eluded capture. After the killing of Bin Laden, the group is decentralized and less efficient. The Taliban has close ties with Al Qaeda, as it started out as Mujahideen fighters during the Soviet Afghan War. The US helped train Mujahideen fighters against the Soviet invasion and occupation. The Taliban emerged as a strong militia group after they won the Civil War, immediately after the withdrawal of the Soviet troops. The Taliban was initially against attacking the US because, after all, we helped them defeat the Soviet Union. But they harbored bin Laden and provided safe haven for Al Qaeda terrorists after the 9/11 attack. Similar to Al Qaeda's militant Islamic fundamentalist ideology, the Taliban is against the westernization of its citizens and modern pleasure. It forces strict Sharia law on its citizens. The Taliban is largely funded and supported by the Pakistan Intelligence, ISI, which stands for Inter-Services Intelligence. The ISI supports the Taliban with logistic supplies and military training in exchange of a strong allied force in Afghanistan to maintain regional strength and strategic depth in their rivalry with India. India provided substantial reconstruction assistance to Afghanistan during the Karzai administration. Many believe that Pakistan opposed reconciliation or peace in Afghanistan, that it benefited from having a weak Afghanistan in which its Taliban proxies hold significant influence, a strategy that Pakistan uses to ward off a perceived existential threat from India. The ISI had close ties with the Haqqani network. Under Taliban, there is no economy, education, healthcare, or government. They violate human rights by restricting women's education and freedom. Women aren't allowed to leave the house without being escorted by a male relative, nor can they wear anything but a burqa which covers them from head to toe. One of the few working opportunities for young men is opium harvesting. They whip women with belts and execute kafirs or infidels and non-believers in the public, sometimes making the family watch. Besides the capture of bin Laden, the Taliban was the main target for counterinsurgency during the War on Terror in Afghanistan. The goal of the US was to establish geo-economical stability and education to change Afghan people's mentality, so there would be less motivation to join a terrorist group. However, corruption in the Afghan government and army was too perforated and it was impossible to rebuild the country. During the Obama administration, he gave a timeline to pull the US troops out of Afghanistan and ordered a bunch of unmanned drone strikes on Taliban compounds, killing a lot of civilians who were then became motivated again to join the insurgents. The US Afghan war lasted for 20 years. The Taliban signed a peace contract with the US in 2020, agreeing to give up relationship with Al Qaeda and not attack US troops, but not its own government and people. They recaptured the capital city, Kabul, immediately upon the withdrawal of US military in 2021 and continued radical Islam on its citizens. ISIS stands for Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. It's also known as ISIL, Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, or simply Islamic State. Levant is roughly corresponding to modern-day Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and certain adjacent areas. ISIS started out as an al-Qaeda splinter group, and is probably the most violent among the three. ISIS aims to create a Islamic State called a caliphate across Iraq, Syria, and beyond. A caliphate is a reign of a chief Muslim ruler. The group implements Sharia law, rooted in 8th century Islam, to establish a society that mirrors the region's ancient past. ISIS uses modern tools like social media to promote reactionary politics and religious fundamentalism. Fighters destroy holy sites and valuable antiquities as their leaders propagate a return to the early days of Islam. In 2015, the US State Department declared ISIS a greater threat than Al Qaeda. ISIS's revenue is funded by oil production and smuggling, taxes, ransoms from kidnappings, selling stolen artifacts, extortion, and controlling crops. ISIS is responsible for many international attacks, including the 2015 suicide bombing of southern Beirut, killing at least 40 people, the 2015 suicide bombing of 6 locations near Paris, killing at least 130 people, and the 2016 explosion in the Brussels airport and a subway station in Germany, killing at least 30 people. It's also notorious for beheading innocent Western humanitarians and journalists and broadcasting the execution videos online in response to US airstrikes. The US military issued special operations and airstrikes on ISIS compounds in Iraq and Syria that killed dozens of ISIS leaders, but in 2022, ISIS released an audio message announcing its new leader. For those who are interested in learning more about the current situation in Afghanistan, I have included a list of resources I used for this video in the description. Feel free to share this video for knowledge sharing and awareness. Thank you for watching.